All right, welcome back to the Revolution and Beer Show weekend, or should I say the Status Quo and Snapple show, because we don't want to offend anybody. We are rebranding, and instead of beer today, we're having a lovely Snapple iced tea. No. Welcome back to the Revolution and Beer Show. I am W.C. Turk, the most dangerous voice on the left. Sitting next to me, my partner,
Brian Murray. Howdy.
Good guess.
Yeah. I forgot my name for a second.
And like us on Facebook at Revolution and Beer. Check us out at revolutionandbeer.com. We've been covering this story a lot, and I'm going to throw something up here just because I like to hear those sounds. We've been covering this story actually since the trial began, and since we've been on the air here at AM 1710 Q4 Radio. But just a little background before we get to our guest, just to catch everybody up. Accused of domestic terrorism in the course of the Chicago NATO Summit, Brian Church, Brent Betterly, and Jared Chase were arguably victims of police entrapment and the use of Red Squad tactics. The Chicago police were formally enjoined from employing. When local and federal police conducted a no-knock midnight search warrant raid in May of 2012 at an apartment in Chicago's Bridgeport neighborhood, it looked at first like a failed mission. Yes, police seized a group of 11 political activists in Chicago to protest an international summit of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, but most of the arrestees were released without charge, and rumors soon began to swirl. Police chained protesters to benches for 18 hours, one television station reported. Chicago Police Department, CPD, sources told Truth Out the raid would unearth Molotov cocktails. I guess they already knew ahead of time.
Where's my Molotov?
Exactly. Homemade firebombs made of breakable glass bottles and gasoline, but they found beer brewing equipment instead. If anybody would like some, one Bridgeport tenant told Truth Out, I would like to offer them a sip of my beer. Then things turned. On one of the 11 Bridgeport arrestees, it turned out 2 were undercover cops. And we'll put pictures of them again on our Facebook page at Revolution of Beer, because everybody should recognize these 2 good folks. And every time you see them out on the street, at the shopping mall, at church, at a gas station, give them a big round of applause and make sure everybody knows exactly who they are. And beer brewing equipment wasn't the only thing the authorities alleged they found before and after the arrests. They found 4 dark beer bottles, enough to change the world, containing a clear liquid, quote-unquote, alleged to be gasoline. They found a pint can containing 4 cloths, alleged by the prosecution to be gas-soaked. We'll ask our guest a little bit about some of that evidence here in a bit. Further items allegedly found included another pint can containing 4 glass vials, each containing saturated cotton, along with 4 gas-soaked pieces of cloth, an empty beer can, a black tactical vest, and a black gas mask. I know quite a few people during the Occupy and NATO protests when I was there that had gas masks. For fear of what the police were about to do to them.
Yeah, there's a thing called common sense. If you're going to walk into a situation like that where you are often hit with chemical agents in order to disperse crowds, you might want to consider finding a way to cover your face, but of course they'll turn that into a crime because they want you to feel pain.
They found a compound bow and 9 arrows. I actually have a compound bow and arrows at my home.
How many?
How many bows or how many arrows?
How many arrows?
Oh, I would say probably a dozen with different tips and caps
You're
on them.
so screwed. You better clear those beer bottles out of your kitchen.
Exactly. But then I go to the UP of Michigan quite often and target practice. They found 2 knives in sheaths, 2 swords in sheaths, and a set of handcuffs, which I think you could probably find in most any adolescent or young man or young single man's apartment on the planet. They found a metal throwing star. Again, I had one all through college.
I don't even want to know.
I have no idea why I had it or even what happened to it. A sharp handheld blade. They found a PVC pipe with a black flag attached. Oh my Lord. I can feel Western democracies crumbling already. Authorities also found a printed photo of the female undercover officer who led SWAT teams to Bridgeport in the first place. Not the least of which because maybe people were a little sensitive about people spying on peaceful protests. This litany of materials, according to what police told Truth Out, belonged to the three men visiting Chicago from Florida to protest the NATO summit, and allegedly, even though they arrested 11 people in the apartment, to set parts of the Windy City aflame. Have you been through Chicago on a Friday night? Dubbed the NATO3 in media reports, they face maximum sentences of 85 years in prison apiece if convicted. That's a hell of a price tag, Rahm Emanuel, for your efforts to try to distract everyone from what was really going on behind closed doors at the NATO summit but I digress, under a decade-old Illinois law that had never been used before, and that was without ever carrying out the attack. Unlike the Boston bombers, the NATO3 hadn't set off any bombs prior to their arrests. They actually wanted to sleep more than anything else, I'm told, and chase girls and smoke pot maybe just a little bit, and definitely drink beer. So I'm not sure that was really on their agenda in the first place. Unlike the Fort Hood shooter, they hadn't shot anyone. They hadn't thrown Molotov cocktails. They definitely hadn't killed anyone, like Mayor Daley's nephew, who just got 60 days in jail for punching somebody in a drunken bar fight.
And killing
him. Boy, if you were black and did that, they'd throw away the key. As was the case with the 5 Cleveland activists in a similar domestic terrorism investigation last year. They just ran their mouths. Wow. I guess I'm getting the death penalty here soon. They just talked about revolution. Holy crap, I'm doomed. And then they allegedly went far enough into conspiracy to elicit major charges, especially with somebody's hand in your back. To this day, more than a year after their arrest in Bridgeport, the NATO3 are still sitting in Chicago's Cook County Jail awaiting their trial. This is obviously a little bit of an older article. Their case is a big one. It's the new face of U.S. counterterrorism investigations, a template for pre-crime arrests. Isn't there a Tom Cruise movie about that, where they arrest you for just thinking about something before it actually happened? Performed through entrapment by police to stop supposedly dangerous political acts before they happen.
Yeah, that's a bit of an introduction. So, and what we're reading from there is actually an article from June 21st of 2013 called "Revealed: The Story Behind the NATO3 Domestic Terrorism and Arrests." That's on truthout.org. It has 2 authors, it's Matt Stroud and Steve Horn, who you probably remember when Chris Giovannis came on and talked about sort of the shenanigans leading up to sort of the case that the prosecutors, the state's attorney, was trying to build in advance of the trial to slander these guys and try to make them out to be totally dangerous terrorists, which we learned from the jury's ruling that they couldn't even convince the jury of that. But hey, Anita Alvarez is going to throw a Molotov at you. Duh! So anyway, I want to introduce
our guest, Emily X.
Emily, who is a part of the NATO3 Defense Committee, and we're going to get into a discussion about what that is and what they have been doing to support these 3 guys, and also the importance of jail solidarity in general. So let's see here. Is this
no, we're good to go.
Okay,
we're good to go, baby.
How are you doing today, Emily?
I'm good. How are you guys?
Okay, well, thanks for joining us, and we'll talk to you next week.
And that's all we got, folks. We'll talk to you.
Good night.
And as a testament to her commitment to this whole thing, I want to also say thank you to her for coming here directly from actually going and visiting with a couple of the guys. So was it 1 or 2 of them that you saw today?
Just one. You're just only able to visit 1 inmate per week.
Right. Okay. That shows you how much I know about going in and visit. Anyway, moving on. So let's talk a little bit about. Can you describe to us what the NATO3 Defense Committee is? This is not the defense team. This is a support. This is an affinity group, correct?
Well, the NATO3 Defense Committee is basically just made up of a bunch of people who, after the NATO summit happened and the arrests happened, we came together to support the NATO3. essentially.
Right.
Yeah, so we're made up of people like me who were part of Occupy Chicago and were here for NATO, and then other folks who were part of different Occupy groups, or also there are some people who weren't ever really involved in Occupy, but they have been involved in anti-state repression work for quite some time.
Right. So there was a lot of organizing that was done in Chicago in opposition to the NATO summit that was held here. And if people remember, originally Rahm had actually tried to have both the G8 and the NATO summit here, and then they took the G8 away from him and held it out at Camp David so they could separate the potential movement that might be building to convene on both of these sort of this cabal of international corporate criminals. I'm just going to go ahead and say that, military criminals in many ways. And there were a lot of people that were coming in from outside of the city as well. And, you know, we're broadcasting from a place that actually held quite a few meetings and events related to NATO. And I just wanted to point out here that, you know, as far as the Chicago scene is concerned, the three people that they have now convicted of wrongdoing in the courts were people that did not come from Chicago. So what was the initial reaction amongst people that were connected to this when these three out-of-towners got rounded up?
Well, at first there was a lot of hoopla, if you will, around it. A lot of people who were involved in Occupy Chicago jumped right into jail support pretty much immediately after the NATO summit ended. And then, unfortunately, a lot of those people have dropped off since then because it is pretty grueling work. It's not very glamorous, but... Yeah.
Right. Well, so give me an idea of the kinds of people that get involved with something like the NATO3 Defense Committee. Are we talking about people that are, you know, diehards only? Or are we talking about people that may have some legal background or family members? Like, what kind of people come into this sort of thing?
Well, sort of all of the above. Like you said, they were out-of-towners. They came from Florida, so all of their family is at quite a distance, so it's kind of been difficult communicating with them. We obviously do, but it's...
Right.
I know the Cleveland 4 Support Committee, for instance, one of the mothers is a main support person. We can't have that here, obviously. Other people, some of them have legal background, some of them are involved in the NLG. There's just a lot of random folks, I guess.
Right. So that's great. I think it's just a really good example of how people come together to take care. We'll come together to take care of our own people that come in and, you know, sort of put skin in the game, put it on the line, and try to make a difference, speak back against the kind of incursion that we have by corporate military interest into all levels of political and civic life, more and more so in civic now as we're having the militarization of police forces. You know, I think it speaks a lot to the Chicago community that, first off, it wasn't Chicagoans that got caught up in this, for the most part, and the three people that were tried and now convicted of these potentially severe arson charges were all from out of town, as we mentioned. I'm fascinated to hear a little bit more about the actual courtroom. I think a lot of us were following this, whereas I have a day job, so I wasn't able to attend the trial as much as I wanted to. I was corresponding with several people that were there off and on, but this was a very interesting situation. First off, was it initially that they said they weren't going to allow people to have like mobile phones and devices in the actual courtroom?
Well, actually, about back in April of 2013, they they made it a rule that you can't bring a phone or mobile device into the courthouse at all. So, but initially it was that you couldn't even bring pens and paper into the courtroom itself.
And for anyone out there who listens to Win Justice with Wendell and Chubb and Mick Gerhardt, you understand very hostile position that the courts in Illinois hold towards the idea of court reporters. They say that it's about budget, but I think they've laid out a case that it is not. So yeah, this was interesting because what this did was it really opened up this opportunity for this play-by-play kind of, social media storm to happen during the trial, and it was fascinating to watch. I wanted to know, could you tell me a little bit about sort of the layout of the courtroom, how the seating was arranged and whatnot, just to try to paint the picture for those of us who weren't directly there?
Yeah, so, before I get to that, first, for those of you who don't know, to get into the courtroom itself, you needed to originally register a day beforehand. You needed to bring a state-issued ID, and they would do a background check, which basically meant if you had a warrant, don't show up, and also if there were any orders of protection between anybody who was going to be there.
This is the usual behavior going into court for most people? Not
at all. I think they said that they've done this 6 other times since the mid-2000s, so this is very unusual. And then after you have your little badge that says you're a spectator, you had to go through another metal detector. You went through one downstairs as well that everybody goes through. So you had to go through another metal detector. And then when you got into the courtroom, there were 4 rows for press, 2 rows for defense, so that was for family and friends. 2 rows for the state, so that was like other states' attorneys, basically. 2 rows for judiciary, which pretty much meant overflow press, basically. And then 4 rows for the public. And also 1 row for Anita Alvarez herself. She got a full row.
You know, there's a whole bunch of jokes I could make there. There's a whole bunch of jokes I could make there about Anita Alvarez needing a whole row, but never mind.
I'm proud of you. I'm proud of you, WC.
I'm being good. Hand me that opener, by the way, here, because we start talking about this. I need alcohol.
He might come back to that.
So this was really actually sort of this not too subtle form of harassment overall for the people involved. Oh, very nice. I'll get to that here in just a few moments. But they were really sort of trying to throw hurdles. Now, let me ask you about how many people were in the courtroom daily for these trials. Did they need that many rows, or was this just manufactured? Did they keep people to those rows? In other words, if only say 1 row of judiciary showed up and Anita Alvarez, no, we won't go there. But if more observers, if more of the public showed up, would they make accommodation for that, or were they just really doing everything in their power to throw hurdles in front of you?
Well, the public section was really only full on the day of the verdict. Unfortunately, the background check, I think, kind of scared a lot of people off, as well as the fact that it was just Monday through Friday when people are at work.
Yeah, that worked with black people during the presidential elections, just by putting up billboards along the highways saying that if you don't have a valid ID, don't show up, you'll be arrested on the spot, which intimidated even people with valid IDs.
Right. So civic intimidation for people that are trying to get involved in civic affairs, which should be an absolute crime anyway. But I guess when the courts do it, it's all right. So basically, the number of heads that could be fit in these sort of 2 support. Oh, I'm sorry. There were two rows for the defense, the people, friends and family, and then how many for the general public?
For the public, there were 4 rows. So each row can have 7 people. So
okay.
You do the math because I'm bad at it.
That's okay. We're drinking beer. We don't deal with math.
Yeah, we don't. I was an art major, so.
It's not the day to do it.
Yeah, I'm in radio. I have nothing to do with facts and math.
We were all art majors, by the way. I think we should point that out.
I know.
Okay.
Which helps our pension for sarcasm, by the way.
Oh, it definitely does. And hopefully you just didn't discredit everything that we say, because if you did, you're an ass. But
so, go ahead.
No.
I was going to say, was this the first court, the actual first criminal trial you had ever been to? Had you been to previous trials?
I personally have not been to any trials. No. Any
studying, any background that you had picked up prior to going into this, or did you sit down in this as kind of a fresh observer?
Well, there were several status hearings for the NATO3 before they actually went to trial, probably 1 to 2 a month, depending on what was actually happening. So I came in with a pretty good background of what's been going on. And
could you record any of this in any way, either in a journal, or I know you couldn't videotape, you couldn't take photographs, but was it possible for you to take notes?
Yeah, they did eventually allow.
Eventually.
Yeah, at first the judge, he has a very strict decorum order, and at first he said he wasn't even going to allow pens and paper. The defense obviously challenged that, and we were eventually able to bring in pens and paper. So I was taking quite a few notes.
Yeah, they really tried to lock this down from the outset. I've heard a lot about the judge being obviously hostile, or almost as if his disposition showed he had already made up his mind over what he thought the outcome of this could be. Did you pick up on that from being in the courtroom?
Well, he is very hostile, but when it comes to other judges, I feel like he's actually a bit more lax than other judges. Like when the trial was actually happening, Gloves or Nadia often put her foot in her mouth and said very dumb things, and the people in the gallery were laughing.
That's the judge now.
Yeah, that was the judge. That's our ombudsman.
Give an example, maybe, of something that Nadia Chico was one of the undercover officers going by the pseudonym Gloves.
Well, I think the one that probably everybody has heard by now is that so in the recordings there were a lot of recordings, and they played a lot of them, and then there was this one where Mo, the other undercover, said something about
Wiegand.
Yes, said something about to Brian Jacob Church. Said, before you hit the bowl in the morning, you should make a list, because he was apologizing for not getting anything done. And one of the defense attorneys asked, what did you take him to mean by when he said hit the bowl? And she said, can't even say it. She thought that it meant going to the bathroom in the morning. So she's obviously a liar. Yeah. Because she's a cop.
So I just think it's fascinating that the role of police invader, they were not just undercover. Was that clearly determined that they were actually infiltrators, despite what she had said repeatedly that they were not infiltrating?
Well, they had.
They did infiltrate, but they weren't infiltrators, or something like that.
Well, they did. There's actually a video, and we posted it on Revolution Beer. Actually, in the article that I was reading from, if you scroll down a bit, there's actual video of the two of them during marches inciting and making they're undercover. They're very much undercover and very much acting as members of the so-called Black Bloc group.
Though they did infiltrate, obviously, but they only had level 2 clearance, meaning they were only allowed to be, quote, undercover officers, meaning they could watch, they could listen, they could record. They couldn't actually do anything themselves. They didn't do that, obviously, but
they went far. They went far beyond that.
Yes.
Yeah, it sounds like they got into a little bit of action management.
Yeah,
and sort of like.
Well, I think, and I think that came out. I think that came out in the testimony, especially from Nadia Chico about the way they were manipulating, and even in the infamous gas station. And I'd like you to talk a little bit about some of the reality behind that video, or maybe the bias behind the videos of the gas station. And then there was some controversy over the gas station attendant and what he saw and what he didn't see, and how that was either pressured or manipulated by the prosecution. But Mo Mehmet Wigun was actually sort of. And I had made the comment earlier about having a hand in your back pushing you forward, and that was very much, at least from my impression of all of this, how it appeared here. Is that how that came across in court?
Well, I mean, to me, yes, I'm obviously biased, but when they were talking about the gas station...
That's okay, so are we, by the way.
When they were talking about the gas station, I believe Mo was the first one to bring it up.
Uh-huh.
And then after that, this is the bigger part. Mo said something about like, yeah, let's go to the BP. I've got $2. Mm-hmm. And when he was testifying, he kept saying like, no, I wasn't offering to pay for it. I was just saying that I have $2. And then he left his recording device on the porch and didn't bring it with him. So, we have no idea who actually paid for it. I mean, we have an idea, but...
No, he was saying, dude, I only have $2. Gasoline, that's expensive, right? That was, I get it.
But do you recall a little bit of that controversy about that? It was initially, and correct me if I'm wrong, but my impression of it was that the gas station attendant or the owner did not remember, did not recognize, or could not put all of this together with one of the defendants. But then suddenly he did.
Yeah, he so that was Jay going. There's video footage of that.
Yep.
The gas station attendant during trial said that the day before that happened, Brian Jacob Church, another one of the co-defendants, came in and asked if he could buy gas and put it in a milk jug. Mm-hmm. He didn't remember this until 21 months later. He remembered it in January of 2014, and yeah.
He's got a hell of a memory.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Quite creative, that guy's memory.
Exactly. So I'm guessing in the 21 months he probably had a total of 7 customers, so that he was able to remember that one specific incident very clearly and the conversation 21 months later. Whereas and hard to believe he hasn't gone out of business, because I think most gas stations in the city of Chicago and around city of Chicago are probably seeing thousands of customers daily. So good on him. That's brilliant. Thoughts on how all that was perceived or if it was perceived with any kind of reality, or did the defense make issue with that, or what was their constraint? Yeah,
the defense they got a chance to cross-examine him and every other witness, but with him they kept asking him questions about like, oh, why didn't you bring this up earlier, etc. Whether or not the jury thought he was lying, I have no idea. Yeah. They had good poker faces. So.
What was if you were sitting on that jury and not connected emotionally, and in solidarity with the Occupy movement, but if you weren't as invested, I suppose, personally in seeing this case properly administered, let's put it that way, the evidence that was presented to the jury, could you have come to the same conclusion as the jury, or was the whole thing funneled to a point in which the jury had to make a determination one way or another? So there was no opportunity for a not guilty on some level. That if they were not guilty on one level, it would drop to the next level to a guaranteed guilty verdict.
That's a hard question to answer. When it came to the terrorism charges, there was a thing called a lesser included charge, which was the lesser included charge for conspiracy to commit terrorism and material support for terrorism were both Class C misdemeanor of mob action, which they did get found guilty on mob action. They did not get found guilty on the terrorism charges.
Right.
There was no lesser included charge for the possession charges, though. Had there been, regardless of what it was, I think they probably would have found them guilty of the lesser included charge. But because there was no lesser included charge at all, it's kind of, I don't know, it's hard to...
Did you feel, as an observer, did you feel that they were being pigeonholed? That the whole course of the trial was leading ultimately to a conviction. We saw with the MyCat3 in the Enbridge 3 in Michigan that the judge going in, and you had some thoughts about the judge earlier, and said that he was actually fairly fair overall. But in the MyCat3 trial, where the statement was made by the judge early on that he intended before the trial that he intended to make an example of these three activists. And I'm wondering if you thought that was an element here with the NATO3 trial.
I mean, the judge definitely, he did have his mind made up, for sure. If it was up to him, if it was a jury, or if it was a bench trial, he probably would have found them guilty on possibly everything. First off, it's a very political case.
Yeah.
The reason I say that is because before the jury went into deliberation, I believe, the judge they generally motion to the judge for a thing called a motion to why am I blanking?
That's all right. Well, one of the things, and I wanted to remind people that you're listening to the Revolution in Beer weekend show with Brian Murray and W.C. Turk, and we're speaking with we can't overtly identify you.
We just choose not to.
Exactly,
because it's fair.
But do you fear, and do others fear who are active witnesses to the trial? Do you fear, given all that's happened here in the city of Chicago and how the justice and the criminal justice system works, do you fear retribution if you're too vocal about what happened during the trial?
Not necessarily,
okay.
But I
had to ask the question.
Yeah, I visit the jail every week, and they know my face, they know my name, they probably know my height and weight because it's on my ID. And anything I do in the waiting room at the jail reflects on the defendants. So if I do something stupid, they're the ones that are going to get flack for it.
So in a way, this is about not adding any fuel to the fire that's already been lit under their feet, which I think is an extension of this idea of supporting people that are really in a lot of deep trouble when it comes down to, I mean, let's face it, these guys didn't actually do anything violent, and I think that what was raised by the throughout the case, throughout the trial, was that it's pretty questionable as to if they actually would have. Yet they're facing potentially 30 years in prison, whereas you have people that get away with highway robbery, rich people that kill people, and they have affluenza, or they get thrown, they don't get thrown in jail, they get sent to jail for maybe 65 days or something like that. I mean, this is I find this absurd, and I think I'm curious to know, like, as you got into it, were you surprised by your like emotions or your reaction to it? Was there anything that just really wrung you and you were like, wow? Was there a moment when you thought, this is so intense, I can't even imagine what it must be like to be one of them?
Now hold that thought. We're going to do a quick break. We'll come back.
Give you some time to think.
That's a great place to. That's a great place to leave off. Let's do a little Radiohead here. We're going to come back. This is the Revolution and Beer Show. We're talking NATO3 today. We're talking the court and criminal justice system. We're talking beer.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. We'll be right back after this. Welcome back to the show. This is a Revolution in Beer show. WC Turk here with my partner, Brian Murray, for Revolution in Beer Weekend. I'm sorry. We did change, didn't we? We're rebanding because we don't want to offend anybody. So we are the status quo.
The hell out of me.
Exactly. We are the status kind of meat and pizza and some collard green salad made by our engineer, Jason Page. So thank you very much. But we don't want to offend anybody.
He feels guilty for
so this is the Status Quo and Snapple show.
I mean, Jason feels guilty for letting all that protest noise come through.
Yeah, he needs to stop that. So, but as a matter of fact, I think we have that bug's coming up again here, and there it is. Brian, Jason, if you could do something, we're getting all of that protest feed again. Yesterday, all day long, we were plagued by the sounds of the Ukraine,
unruly.
All of those
unpatriotic,
those selfish people in the Ukraine attempting to fight for freedom and stuff, and that was getting in the way of our.
What's wrong with them? Don't they all have refrigerators?
No, that was getting in the way of our discussion of Miley Cyrus and an exploration of her wonderful, wonderful work. This coming up. Join me, WC Turk, and Q4 Radio Tuesday, February 25th at 7 p.m. at 375 East Chicago at the Northwestern University School of Law for a screening of the documentary film. And, boy, those protesters, they're just selfish, aren't they?
Rowdy.
Yeah. I can turn them down a little bit. I just can't rid the system of them. Damn democracy people. Documentary film Shadows of Liberty, this international acclaimed documentary film, reveals the extraordinary truth behind the news media censorship, cover-ups, and corporate control. In highly revealing stories, renowned journalists, activists, and academics, including Danny Glover, Julian Assange, Dan Rather, Amy Goodman, David Simon, and more, give insider accounts of a broken media system. Controversial news reports are suppressed. People are censored for speaking out, and lives are shattered as the arena for public expression is turned into a private profit zone. Shadows of Liberty is dedicated to the journalists and information freedom fighters, the heroes of our time. Hey, that's you and me, who dedicate their lives to our right to freedom of information, the central pillar of a free society. There will be a thrilling...
It's not just you and me, it's Emily and NATO3 and everyone else that's, even more so the people that have gotten really screwed in this last year of amazing political radicalization that's happened across this country and across the world.
There will be thank you for that. There will be a thrilling, and not just because I say so, but because it was written here for me, a post-screening conversation with filmmaker Jean-Philippe Tremblay, Reverend Jeanette Wilson of Rainbow Push, who I had the incredible fortune of working with some years ago during the Rwandan conflict. Dale Lehman, news director of WZRD 88.3 FM, looking forward to meeting him. And our buddy, Mitchell Stepanchik of Chicago Media Action. It will be moderated by me, WC Turk, from AM 1710. Admission is free, but space is limited, and I can tell you I've already heard from a number of groups. I've heard from Dave Hatch and the folks at Iron, and also Chicago Area Peace Action are planning to make it out there. So please RSVP. Hello. It's the beer. To reserve a seat, you can go to Revolution and Beer on Facebook. And find that. We'll post that here shortly. This special screening is sponsored by Move On Chicago, Rainbow Push, Illinois Campaign for Political Reform, Bloom Legal Clinic, Northwestern Law, Chicago Media Action, Multiculti, and WZRD 88.3 FM. And we're talking with a guest regarding the NATO3 and some of the issues there. And I wanted to give folks a little bit of a background. And I wrote about this extensively on our blog. It was then 900 Pound Gorilla. I believe we posted some of this at Revolution and Beer, so people have to look in the archives a little bit.
We'll have to go. We'll go back through and find all that content and repost it.
Repost it, absolutely.
We can do that.
And one of the issues regarding this, and we also saw this during the ALEC conference here in Chicago, was that the authorities were massaging the message. In other words, the protesters were out there, the activists were out there with a very definite message. One of those messages regarding and the people that were the reason people were out in the streets so vehemently during the NATO protests was because, first, it was being held behind closed doors. Second, this is at a time when nations, and particularly many of the member nations of NATO, France, Spain, the United States, Great Britain, were cutting social programs as they talked about, while at the same time they're exchanging hundreds of millions of dollars or billions of dollars behind closed doors without any sort of oversight or without any sort of deference to public opinion and what the public thought was best for society. In other words, they were investing more in war than they were in peace and in starving people in their own countries. So that was the background for the NATO protests. But we saw regularly, and I had this issue. John Cody, for one, at WBBM, in an interview with me, was completely animated about the prospect for violence at the NATO protest, and could not get off of that. He was animated and obsessed to the point almost a sexual.
Yeah, he was really kind of hot for it. I think.
For about the Black Bloc, and how that these were terrible terrorists who were coming to burn down Chicago. So the media was truly focused on all that, and there was an effort. And you recall the red zone throughout the downtown loop to terrify the population and turn Chicago into a siege mentality, in which fear was preeminent and was manufactured by the authorities, but blamed upon the protesters. And the amount of money expended in that effort, and the so-called security effort by the police and other authorities, was monumental, and there needed to be some justification for it. And in my very, very humble opinion, that justification came in the form of these three young gentlemen. Did I characterize that pretty well? Whew, good. I need a beer.
Yeah. So yeah, wet the whistle there a little bit.
I'm working on it.
Yeah. So when we were right before the break, I was asking a bit of a personal experience question about the magnitude of this particular circumstance, and if that ever at any point struck in an overwhelming way. As Emily was working on this, and I mean, she's pretty tough. I mean, obviously, anyone that was involved with Occupy and has followed through to this point has gone through quite an intense transformation. I would say the majority of those people have. There were some that have been around doing things for a while, but we really saw an upsurge in the numbers involved in, issues-based activism and direct action political activity. So, what were your thoughts as you were sitting there in a courtroom? I'm just curious to know if there was anything that was really stood out to you or shook you up
through the whole trial.
Yeah.
Well, the biggest thing is probably the amount of surveillance that came out in the trial. There was a tracker put on the defendant's car. Thousands and thousands of pages of Facebook correspondence came out, which is really kind of weird. Like, if you think about, like, when you're messaging a friend on Facebook, just imagine, like, being in a courtroom with 100 other people and having them read. It's creepy. There's that, and then, just, like, the amount of surveillance is probably the biggest
right
that came out of it, other than just like the sheer comedy of the whole trial. It
right.
was pretty funny.
And as I was following it in the press here on the show, and as Brian and I were talking about it throughout that, one of the things that I was that seemed apparent to me, at least, and excuse me, let me know if this is your impression, was that I didn't think that the trial was being conducted fairly. It seemed to me that first of all, the the prosecution was attempting a lot of different motions, was attempting a lot of different efforts in order to hamper the defense, shut down the ability of the defense to make motions or to properly conduct a defense, which seemed to me to be highly irregular. And generally, it seems in criminal trials, it seems to be the other way around, where the onus, discovery and what have you, the onus is on the prosecution, and that it's the defense that's working to attempt to limit the prosecution's ability to make its case within the constraints of the law, to give the ultimate deference to the defendant. Your impression?
I mean, yeah, that's definitely true. Throughout the whole process, from the day they were arrested, the judge has kind of just made it pretty obvious that he sides with the state.
Yeah.
Just by every time the defense works on a motion for a month or whatever, they'll present it and it'll get shot down. Almost always. It's pretty discouraging, and they're pretty awesome for
and in fairness, there were some critical motions that were granted to the defense by the judge, but it seemed that there was few and far between. I think there was only a couple in which the and I can't remember the specifics offhand, but it seemed like most often the favoritism was to the prosecution.
Yeah, that's definitely true. I'm trying to think of an example. And
I'm trying. There might have been one or two,
there was one. I remember reading one about sort of the constitutionality of the way that the police officers conducted themselves, which that was a topic that was brought up several times, and that the prosecution seemed to just really step in it to an absurd point, and the defense called them out on it, and then the judge sort of scolded the defense because they sort of set it up for a spike in opening statements, and then but he let the question that was asked stand. I remember reading about that situation. Not that you have to recall that specific.
I think you might be referring to when Durkin kept bringing up federal and why it's not in federal court. I'm not sure if that's what you're referring to.
It could be.
And then he was threatening to sanction Durkin.
Yeah.
He ended up not, as far as I know.
Yeah.
That's a very important thing to note, is that and I think
that it didn't end up in federal court.
That it didn't end up in federal court, and these are terrorism charges. Why did the federal courts or the federal court decide that they didn't want to have anything to do with this, or not to say they didn't want to have anything to do with it? I'm sure that they were in contact.
Well, I can tell you, Chris Giovannis and I had talked about that at some point on the air. That first of all, that having this trial in a national forum creates potentially a national dialogue. It also creates a national scrutiny, but it also throws us onto Barack Obama's plate. Right. And there seemed to me a substantial effort to insulate the Democrats and the Obama administration from having their hands in this in any way.
And I mean, let's face it. Right now, the powers that be, the power elite, however you want to refer to them, the corporate fascists, I like to refer to them as, are very much aware.
I like to call him Bob.
That, or Sue even. They're very much aware that there is a growing basis of unity amongst factions on what are considered to be opposing sides of the political spectrum around issues related to the constitutionality of surveillance, the constitutionality of being able to defend oneself, or the act of the government, the federal government, intruding upon that.
Yeah.
And to me, when you're talking about the amount of security or the amount of surveillance and that huge mass of info that yielded. I mean, this is a direct representation of what we are dealing with right now in the face of the NSA and what we've learned from the various leaks that have happened, not only from Snowden but also related to Stratfor and Jeremy Hammond, about what the entire I'm going to call it the military-industrial complex. This moves beyond private sector, moves beyond public sector, moves beyond government. They are employing private entities to do this kind of work, and they're spending our tax dollars to hire them to contract this stuff out, and then they're throwing responsibility back to them, but they're never interested in prosecuting them for anything that they've done wrong. So, if you are someone that's concerned about what can happen to someone in this day and time, when they can literally grab every bit of information or every thought that you've ever put online and turn it into a case, this is really a good example.
Yeah.
And thankfully, they were not convicted of terrorism. I think I'm curious to know, and you don't have to expand on this. This is my own personal question. Have you seen any acknowledgement from them that they understand sort of that trailblazing or precedent kind of aspect? I mean, obviously they understand what they were up against and why so many people were interested in the kinds of support that came in. But does that seem to be on their minds, or are they just worried about getting through this really difficult situation?
So I visited Brent recently, and he was talking about, actually the day after the verdict, he was upset, clearly, obviously. I mean, he has 2 felonies on his record now, big felonies too, and he was obviously upset, and then he kept trying to, I kind of do the same thing. It's kind of like, on one hand, this is awesome. Like, it's really amazing that in a post-9/11 world, you can beat terrorism charges. Like, that's unheard of, as far as I know. But on the other hand, it's still like they still face 30 years in prison, whereas before they faced 40 years in prison. So it's not like it was.
How are they doing with all this? I mean,
they're upset. I think as time goes on, they get a little bit better. But
and what's the next step for the defense? Is there are they appealing the case? Is there an appeal option?
They have a status update on February 28th.
Uh-huh.
We don't know when they're going to be sentenced yet. It could be as late as May. I believe as soon as they get sentenced, they are able to appeal it. Which, as far as I know, they all 3 are planning to appeal it.
Yeah. And then what was the prosecution? We all see these crime shows in which one side wins the case and they all high five each other and big hugs all around and way to go. What was the reaction of the prosecutors when the sentence, or not the sentence, when the conviction was announced, or when the
when they announced the verdict?
Did they seem satisfied, or was it like, we've just been told what to do and we got that job done?
Well, actually, in the courtroom, I didn't actually look at them. I know in hindsight I should have. I was a little preoccupied. But afterwards, Anita Alvarez had a press conference, of course, and she declared it a victory, of course, because she's not going to say that she was defeated.
Yeah.
But
all Nazis salute.
But so the prosecutors
did
were
I say that? I didn't say that out loud, did I?
The prosecutors that were on the case were all standing behind her, and they just kind of, I don't know, they just looked very like deer in the headlights, sort of.
Like they've just destroyed 3 men's lives in order to justify a budget.
You would hope that would sink in, but
ego?
I seriously doubt they're that concerned about that. I'm sorry, that's my own personal opinion.
I think it was actually more like they were upset that they didn't get the terrorism charges, because they wanted. This was a terrorism case. It wasn't an arson case. It was a terrorism case. Mm-hmm. They were originally charged with 11 counts, and right before the trial, they dropped 4 of them. because they wanted to make it into a terrorism case.
Yes.
And they didn't get their terrorism charges. So Anita Alvarez was, like, visibly upset. I think everybody knows that she threatened a reporter saying, like, how would you want a Molotov thrown at you, because he asked if it was a defeat. And but then she's saying it's a victory. But she's saying it's a victory when she's, like, visibly angry. So it's kind of amusing to me.
I think it's, to me, I think it's questionable and also unimportant if these guys had any real intention of coming and being heroes and leading the revolution or starting the revolution or whatever. I think it's really sad that they got caught up in this. They were tricked. That's my opinion, and entrapped into this, just like Jeremy was entrapped into that. Barrett Brown was entrapped. The Cleveland Four. All of these different people that have been caught up in the last year oftentimes were handheld and walked right up to the arrest. And everything was placed in their hands and on their persons to get them arrested by people that facilitated that happening, that these people would probably not have come across on their own. But I think they are heroes now. I mean, they whether or not they really intended on it, and it's really scary to think that, you know, these guys are going to wind up in jail for decades over this, or they could.
Aside from the conviction, was there ever a time during the trial when all the court reporters or all the observers or the friends or the family were left scratching their head, saying, "What the was that?" A couple of moments that you just didn't think you'd ever expect to see amid this trial.
Yeah, there were actually kind of a lot. There were, like, so many that I can't even really point to many of them. There was one really good one, though. So we've heard about this shield, this big bad shield that they've had. And it was this, like, they were gonna either stand behind it and throw Molotovs, or they were going, if the police came at them, they were gonna push it into them, or something. I don't really know.
Yeah. Even though the police are usually marching forward with shields themselves, and it's kind of
But so they bring out this shield that they originally said has to have 3 or 4 men to carry. One prosecutor brings it in first off by himself. And
I thought you were going to say Anita Alvarez brought it in by herself, because I would expect that.
But so there were screws sticking out of it, and in the opening statements they were talking about, like, oh, this could, like, hurt somebody, it's a weapon, blah blah blah. But so they bring it by, and the screws that are sticking out are, they later measured it 3/4 of an inch. They're sticking out 3/4 of an inch, and they're only sticking out where the handles are. So they drilled in the handles and didn't have short enough screws for the thin plywood.
So you hear out there, all you rioters, your craftsmanship counts. Your craftsmanship counts when it comes down to, you know, the pending court case that you might find yourself involved in. Put some finishing on it, a little bit of polish.
Exactly.
Because otherwise,
remember shop class.
Yeah. You know, get a hacksaw or something, or put some corks on them. I don't know. Don't leave those points sticking out.
So just the last couple of minutes, what do people need to know or take away from this, or what is there anything that the 3 defendants would want us to know and take away from this?
I know delete your Facebook is one thing. If you have a Facebook, delete it. That's one thing they would want you to know. Other than that, you know, jail support is just a very important thing that everybody who is able to do should do.
What kind of activities are involved in jail support and prisoner solidarity?
Well, there's visiting, letter writing, which is very important, sending books, donating money for their commissary. They get, like, next to nothing from the jail itself. So they need commissary to supplement the lack of food and lack of clothing that they're given.
And I'm going to make sure I have all the URLs related to to supporting, throwing some support, love these guys away from you, and get them up on our page and on our Facebook page and our website.
And is there a way that people can still support these three guys?
There is, yeah. So they're still in Cook County Jail. Like I said, they won't be sentenced. Well, they may be sentenced up until May. It could be before then.
Yeah.
It could be as late as May. So they'll be in Cook County until then, and then they'll be transferred to a receiving center, and then a few weeks after that will be transferred to a state prison.
How's their physical safety in Cook County? Have they had any issues? Have they had any problems?
Not so many. They're in protective custody.
Okay.
Which, I mean, for better or worse, that's where they are. They don't really have much contact with people, though, which is the.
And I've never been there. I likely will be after they erase the First Amendment, but yeah, I think that's a concern of a lot of people, is the physical well-being of these three men, because there seems to be. We seem to have a growing number of political prisoners in this country. And I think people are concerned now because those people aren't absolutely not hardened criminals. They're average, everyday people now thrown into a terrible situation where they can either be, they can either be supported as people interested in freedom and justice, or they can be targeted by not only those within the prison system that would take advantage of somebody smaller and weaker, but also the authorities who might like to continue this sort of ego-charged harassment or punishment beyond that which the state prescribes, whether you agree or disagree.
Yeah.
I've had plenty of experiences in Cook County Jail, and believe me, you don't have to worry about the other inmates. You have
Gotcha.
to worry about the rep and the guards.
Yeah, I was just going to say the guards are probably more terrifying than everybody else that's in there.
Yeah, and that was one of the things that I think I was concerned about.
And remind me, I'm not even going to butcher the guy's name again. I've tried before and failed miserably. But the former FBI agent, I believe it was an FBI agent that was a whistleblower during the Bush administration.
Yeah, and the name escapes me as well.
Starts with a K. If you haven't read this letter that he had published from jail about the experiences that he had with the CCO and the various authority figures in the jail, how they set him up to get into a deadly fight with someone else who was accused or was supposedly the uncle of one of the Boston bombers. How he was called in and told that this guy was told by Al Qaeda to kill him, and they called the other guy in and told him the exact opposite. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that you get into. These people are literally
so
playing
the attention
with people's
shouldn't
lives.
End.
Yeah, they're playing with people's lives. Once they think they can get away with sinking their teeth into you, they're going to try to drain you for everything they have, and that's why these guys are heroes, and that's why more and more people need to get into this fight, because we can't let just a few people bear the weight of this.
Agreed.
And the longer we wait, the more severe it's going to be for any of us that get caught.
Absolutely. Keep your focus, people. Emily, last thought before we go. How can people get involved, or where can they go for updates?
We have a website, which I believe you said would be linked to. It's freethenado3.wordpress.com.
Okay.
And then we have a WePay. We have shirts for sale.
Great.
Their addresses are on there. Everything you need to find is on there.
Shirts that you designed. I'm gonna
Well
say
done.
that because I like them. And,
Excellent. Yeah. So thank you so much for coming. Please keep us updated.
For sure. Yeah.
Thank you very much. We'd appreciate that, because the story is important to us. The last thing I have, as the theme song begins to play here, is coming up next is a really, really powerful show we did with Gwendolyn Chubb yesterday, Win Justice. What you don't know about the justice system can definitely hurt you. Gwen had some tough news yesterday, because she's not only speaking about the issue of family rights and divorce and child custody, but she's living it. And it was a really tough show yesterday.
It was too real, man.
It was.
I think you could at least lighten it with a little bit of like
Miley
ABBA
Cyrus
in the background or Justin Bieber or something like that.
Can do.
I think you may really hurt some people out there.
But please stay tuned for that. We're going to replay that with Gwendolyn's blessings, and actually the show, we've come to find out, has affected a number of people. So we definitely
need to listen to that show to understand. I mean, this is sincere human consequence and emotion and dialogue here. I mean, this
the real pain of that whole situation.
Yeah, if you want to understand why there needs to be a serious change in the court system in Illinois and the country, especially related to divorce proceedings, you really, really, really need to listen to that show. You will hear it in more ways than one at the same time.
Absolutely, and that's coming up in just a couple of minutes. Plus, my coverage of the Ukrainian crisis and how it rudely interrupted my biography of Miley Cyrus and her great music. A great thinker, Miley, and somehow reality was intruding. We'll find out why.
Solidarity to the Ukraine.
Brian, thank you so much. Emily, thank you so much. Neil. Desmond. Nice job, buddy.
Thanks for being here on Buzzman today. I love you, man.
This has been the Revolution and Beer Show weekend. Thank you, guys. We'll see you next week. I'll see you on Monday. We'll see you next week.